So much.
Have a small thank you, Mr. Sinha. Thank you. That was. I'm sorry we had to rush you through, but we just have to keep to a schedule. We are not going to break for tea. In fact, we would ask the next panel to please move to the dais. We are very happy. It's a very distinguished panel. It's chaired by Dr. Adnan Khan of the London School of Economics and also of the IGC. Dr. Adnan Khan is someone who has helped the Bihar program over the years. Then we are very happy that some senior people from Bihar government are here today. Mr. Amarjeet Sinha, please would you come? Mr. Chanchal Kumar, Sanjay Kumar, and Mr. Amrit Pratyaya. Would you please all come? Now, brief introduction, although they probably don't need introduction to most of the audience here, but at least to those of us who stay outside. We have Amarjeet Sinha is the Principal Secretary, Human Resource Development. We missed him yesterday, but thankfully he is here today. Then we have Mr. Chanchal Kumar, who is Secretary, PWD, Public Works Department and Culture, and Mr. Amrit Pratyaya, who is Secretary, Road Construction, and Mr. Sanjay Kumar, who is Director of the Bihar Health Society. Now we have two discussions. As you can see, this is a very high-powered group. We have Rathin Roy, who is Director of the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, and the other discussant is an expert on Bihar. He has written a book on Bihar, Dr. Rajesh Chakrabarti. He is in the Indian School of Business. It goes by a slightly different name. Rajesh, what is it called? Your Manali? Oh, Mohali, yes. It's the Bharati Institute of Public Policy, for which he is the Executive Director in Mohali. Okay. Well, Adnan, it's up to you.
Tea will be served at your table.
And tea would be served. We are not denying you tea.
It really is a very distinguished panel, and I'm honored, humbled to be chairing this panel. As a former member of the Pakistan Administrative Service, the first thing I was taught was anyone senior to you, even by a year, is always not only to be respected, but there are norms of decorum that are to be observed. And by that count, almost everyone sitting on this desk is senior to me. So if you hear a lot of sir and me deferring to them, so that is part of my training. So what I will do, if the other members of the panel agree, is just to give you an overview, broad overview of the subject, and then request each of the panel member, and I'll introduce them separately to speak about their experiences and perspective about innovation in government, and then open the floor to discussion. So, to many people, the whole concept of innovations in government is something like an oxymoron. How could you have innovations in government? At a more serious level, so now that I'm made the transition from a serving Babu to a missing Babu to maybe a messed up researcher, I no longer have to defend the government. But at a more serious level, there is a common recognition that public sector matters hugely in terms of all the outcomes of interest that we are interested in, whether it's human capital, it's governance, it's law and order, or any other thing, economic growth. Bihar is a prime example of this. Bihar, as governance improved in Bihar, it became a success story that is known not only within India, but within the region. It's very, very commonly known in Pakistan, but also the rest of the world. Again, an example of where governance, institutional and political change instituted a set of changes that turned around Bihar from its trajectory of low equilibrium, high crime, low growth to a better trajectory. However, we also know from our experience and from a lot of formal evidence about the failures of the public sector. For instance, in case of India, we all know about the shining India that we all talk about. But there is enough evidence about, call it weaknesses, call it challenges of even a successful state like India. This is what people like Land Pritchard, professor at Kennedy School, Harvard, calls India as a flailing state. Not as a failed state or a failing state by any margin, but a flailing state in the sense that a state which has enough capacity, which is growing, but somehow it's strong mind, but its limbs are not working as nimbly or as efficiently as they should have. And he and many others argue that it is the public sector that is failing India, that is not allowing India to, holding back India from even further growth, that if not addressed, could reverse or maybe at least prevent India from growing further. And there we have enough examples. We know from Karthik's work in education, we know from other people's work. For instance, Jishnu Das' work, I think it's from Madhya Pradesh, if I remember correctly, where the worst medical care, maybe to begin with, the worst medical care in, I think it was Madhya Pradesh, is provided by doctors in public hospitals. So typically take less than a minute to diagnose or to write on one patient, start writing. They sent, call them ghost or fake patients with symptoms of common diseases to hospitals both in public and private sector and observe what the doctor did. So did both a quantitative as well as a qualitative study. So the doctors basically take less than a minute, start writing the diagnosis in most cases by just looking at the patient, weren't able to diagnose the most common, very visible symptoms of diseases like asthma or heart attack or other diseases, even though they were very highly qualified. So which is the next thing? The best medical care in Madhya Pradesh is also provided by the same doctors, public school sector doctors, while working in the private practice. So it's not that they're not trained appropriately. It's the incentive and institutional environment within government there is something wrong there. Similar examples from education, driving license, work done by, again, Jishnu and others in Delhi. I can cite an example from Pakistan where, again, Jishnu, Asim Khwaja from Harvard and others, they have rigorously studied education sector, both public and private in Pakistan. So on average, the public school teachers are paid 5 times more than an average private school teacher, who are typically girls living in a village and operating a mom and private school within maybe one room. So public school teachers typically paid 5 times more, better qualified, normally masters or bachelors, whereas the private school teachers are normally at least 2 to 3 grades below on average. But the learning outcomes are far, far worse for public school teachers than private school teachers. There is a deficit of learning by at least 2 to 3 years. So kids I think if in year 3 in primary school know as much as kids in year 1 in private school. So there's at least a learning deficit of 2 years, primarily because teachers don't show up. There are no incentives, there's no accountability structure to basically motivate them to work. So I'll come to request my panel to both provide their personal example, but maybe provide a perspective. But I also want to ask them, request them to go deeper into not only incremental reforms or marginal reform, but deeper in substantive questions where deeper reforms, institutional reforms could be possible and how to sustain those innovations. And from my limited personal experience in the public sector, some of the best ideas for reform came from outside the public sector, and not just from the top of the public sector. So traditionally, we have a top-down culture where most of the, call them officers or other public sector workers, are second-guessing what the top guy would say. And then, obviously, deferring to that, or maybe adopting what the top guy would say, second-guessing that, and adopting that as a view because that will be feasible. But some of the best ideas, in my experience, have come from people who have more domain knowledge, who are at the middle tiers or younger tiers. Whereas my own experience of reform, a few reforms that have succeeded at a very small scale, mostly process type of reforms, were cases where one was able, and I was able to build a coalition outside the government. A broad coalition of interest within, but especially outside the government. In some cases, even to the extent of trying to overcome obstacles from within your own department or from within the government as well. So I'll ask the panel to provide their perspective also. But there's one particular type of innovation that I want to focus, since this is an IGC perspective, and I can't, being an IGC person, I can't but do some marketing. So, which is a type of innovation that builds on expertise and knowledge, domain, institutional knowledge of people from within the government, policymakers, bureaucrats, like the type that we are sitting on this table, but also builds on and collaboration with people from outside the government. In particular, I'm talking about research community. So collaboration between researchers and policymakers of the type that IGC is promoting, ADRI is promoting, other organizations like JPOL, others are also promoting, provides an avenue for deeper, for a collaboration which could provide ideas, new ideas, but also provide a context in which those ideas could be institutionalized, implemented, and also evaluated. Because one of the major limitations of reforms is we try out, and there are people, very innovative people in government, they try out different ideas, but then we don't learn anything much from them. And let me give you just a few examples of where, in at least my experience, that has been done. And some of those examples are from Pakistan, the context that I am more familiar with. For instance, like we're currently working on a project on tax, how to motivate, incentivize tax collectors. How do you reduce corruption? How do you provide them the right incentives to work harder and to work more honestly? So the typical solutions adopted by the government over the years were mostly either a complete stick approach or a carrot approach. They doubled the salaries of most of these guys, but then the Chief Minister of Punjab and other officials declared after a year or two that nothing has worked. We have doubled their salaries. We have also doubled their salaries. So the typical solution that was adopted there, not just for tax collectors, but also for other government departments, for police also, judiciary, police, and patwaris, I don't know what you call here, doubling their salaries in expectation that they will work harder and honestly. And the common perception was nothing changed. The Chief Minister himself and other high officials within the government also declared that nothing, there has been no impact of that. To be honest, we also discussed with them that we can't come to this conclusion without having some formal evidence. To be honest, we don't really know whether it has worked or not. If some aspect of it was a bundle intervention, some aspect of it has worked or not. So that started a collaboration between an IGC research team, including me, Ben Olken, who is a professor at MIT, Asim Khwaja, professor at Kennedy School, Harvard, 4 years ago, where we worked with the government on optimal incentive mechanism for tax collectors. So And it's an example of a collaboration that begins not ex post, when one side has decided on something and just wants another partner to either implement it or to evaluate it. So the typical model of such collaboration is researchers have thought of a model or something, are looking for a context to implement it. Or policymakers have already thought of a design and they want researchers to come and rubber stamp or just to evaluate it. Useful in some contexts, but another example of doing this is a collaboration that starts ex ante in terms of designing both ideas, both sides, because both sides have ideas that the other side doesn't have. So researchers have ideas from what is the frontier in terms of theory, but other experiences, rigorous evidence, which, which typically policymakers don't have. Or they don't have the time, usually engage in firefighting all the time. Whereas policymakers have domain knowledge, what works, what doesn't work, which is extremely valuable, which not all researchers value, but without which also innovations originating from the side of the researcher would be not feasible, not implementable. So there is something to be said about the collaboration between the two. That's exactly what we did. So we designed incentive mechanism. First did a pilot. We did 3 things. I don't want to go into detail. I presented in Delhi, where in one treatment we did double the wages, but we had a third-party survey of whether it worked or not, whether it helped reduce corruption or not. The second was providing high-powered incentive to tax inspectors. The more you collect, the more proportion of that gets back to you. The third one being an audit treatment. The more the citizens are satisfied with you, the taxpayers are satisfied with you in terms of your accuracy of a tax assessment and satisfaction with your services, the better remuneration or rewards that you get. The first year was a small pilot in Lahore, worked very well. The Chief Minister approved it. All tiers within government approved it. Planning and development and finance. In fact, finance took a narrow view of let's only look at this project from a returns on investment ROI perspective. If this project gives us a positive ROI, yes, we are interested, otherwise not. But other organs within government, Chief Minister in particular, but also planning and development, and especially its chairman, who is now the Chief Secretary of Punjab, took a broader view that what we need from this project is not just a narrow return on investment type of approach. What we need from this project is whether innovations in civil service of a certain type work or not work. What the government is primarily interested in is learning whether it works or not, whether we should go down this route in future or not. Whether it has a positive ROI or not, it doesn't matter to us. It turned out 2 years later, now we have just completed it. We covered half of Punjab, Punjab being a province almost the same size or maybe slightly bigger than Bihar, more than perhaps 120 million people. So the whole province was treated in that sense. Half the province was controlled, the other being treated. We have a very positive ROI, so for every rupee that the government invested, it is getting far more back. But also in terms of learning, we can show rigorous evidence what works and what doesn't work. I don't want this talk to be about that one. Doing a exactly similar project on procurement, where we're working with government ex ante, then sharing their procurement data with us, and a research team comprising Professor Oriana Bendiara from LSE, Andrea Pratt from Columbia, myself, working with the government in measuring value for money. In that case, procurement being a key reform in any government, but how do you measure value for money? The objective of any procurement reform is efficiency in procurement. But no one has cracked out the method of how do you measure and how do you then use that measure of value for money to either incentivize or to monitor the performance of different procurement offices. We have done that in case of generic goods like paper, pencils, computers, laptops, printers, and such goods. And we showed to the government, again done collaboratively because all the insider knowledge came from within the government. And we jointly showed to the government that there is huge variation in procurement prices, which is not explained by anything else but some characteristics of procurement officers. So same paper, A4 paper, 80 gram, um, exactly the same specifications, within the city of Lahore is being purchased by similar, apparently similar public bodies on a scale of 1 to 3. So, and similarly, all other goods that we are currently studying. So that helped start another set of discussions of what is to be done about this. We work with the government in designing, institutionalizing it within the regular system of the government, where they can collect this information on attributes of the goods that can help determine value for money, and then use further set of reforms on incentives and monitoring and how do you change, at which rules do you change in order to encourage more innovative behavior in terms of procurement. So we are currently doing that. Again, it's an RCT, randomly evaluated. By the end of this year, next year we'll have results. Then we'll sit again with the government. How do you take these results forward in terms of institutionalizing it within the government? So I'll end there. I'll request now the panel but I'll request them to not only give their perspective on this whole question, maybe a few examples if they want to, but ideally also, since this is an IGC event, researchers are here, discuss one or two issues, specific examples which are of question that maybe keep you awake at night, where you would find input or collaboration with researchers helpful. Adli and IGC are here, 3I, J-Paul is here, other researchers are here. They would perhaps would also be interested in your hearing your reviews on this. So let me first request Shri Amarjeet Sinha and introduce him. Amarjeet Sinha, Principal Secretary, Department of Education, is a 1983 Bihar cadre IAS officer, held several leadership positions at Government of India, Bihar, DFID and UNICEF, where he became a key architect in framing policies in health and education. In his previous role as Principal Secretary Health at Government of Bihar, he led innovative framing and implementation of policies that have directly improved the lives of women and children across the state. So perhaps you're far better qualified than me in talking about these issues. So it's up to you. I'll request you to maybe take 10 to 15 minutes each.
Chairperson, colleagues on the panel, distinguished audience at this conference. At the outset, I'd like to apologize. I could not make it yesterday. I was away in the field, and as you are aware, the state, we've had a setback in a school, a very, very serious incident where 23 innocent lives have been lost. An incident where it's not a case of food poisoning, it's a case of poison in food. Somebody seems to have put poison there, whether accidentally or intentionally, it's for the police investigation to determine. It has been a big setback for us, even though the reasons we have tried to look into it, and in fact, I raise this because the setback would not have been so major if it had not been the fact that with all the efforts that we had made, we can say with confidence that majority of our schools serve a good hot cooked meal. Yesterday also, I was on my surprise inspections eating food in schools. All my colleagues who go to the field do eat in the school. The issues which have thrown up, and which I think I'd like to begin initially, because I am also raising this because unfortunately, a presentation of a study made on ICDS yesterday has been today reported in one of the newspapers, Times of India, page 2, that it is a study on the hot cooked meal in school. I'm sorry, that is not the case. And I would invite the researchers here to do a study on the hot cooked meal program. Unfortunately, the study is in ICDS, and simply because we've had an incident of poisoning in one school, it doesn't mean that we are painted black all the time. Visit the schools, study them, point it out to us. We want the criticism to be there, but it has to be based on, the study is on ICDS, and that report says it's about, there's a reference to midday meal. Both are completely different programs. The reason why I'm reacting sharply is because we have made efforts. the point which has come up is, for example, in the midday hot cooked meal scheme, one of the innovations, since I was asked to speak on innovation, last about 2 years now, my colleagues who work on the midday meal program, Rahul Singh and Lakshmanan, they have worked intensively to design a very useful integrated, it's a voice recording system, an IVRS system, interactive voice recording system, where in every school, the meal we serve, how many children have eaten on a daily basis, just after the meal, we have an update available on the IVRS in the public domain. Not only that, we have followed it up with checking with the MIS, how many children were actually present there. Is there a difference between the IVRS reporting and the MIS reporting? The problem that we face, and I would like to, because we don't want to conceal anything, the problem essentially is, this program, as you are aware, has a mandate, a judicial mandate, the Supreme Court, that we have to provide food to every child. The Right to Education Act says you have to have a school within 1 kilometer for every child. In our state, what has happened is, between 2007 and 10, we have opened a large number of schools to comply with the requirement of the 1 kilometer norm, but unfortunately, because infrastructure was not available, of the 21,000 schools that we opened during this period, we have been able to provide buildings only to about 14,000 or so. We still have 7,000 to 8,000 schools, which do not, some of them do not even have a land of their own. It is not that the building we did not want to do. Even land is not available, but there is a school. It is functioning from a community room. Even the school where we've had the incident, the Gandaman Primary School, it was functioning from one community hall. The first major decision we have taken, that even though it amounts to temporarily not fulfilling the RTE requirement, we would like to merge these schools which run in one small shanty somewhere, and in that room, law says that I have to provide hot cooked meal even there, whatever the space. Now this is really our challenge. These 8,000 to 9,000 schools which do not have proper space, how do we run those schools? How do we provide a kitchen and a shed? There is no land available. Now, this is an issue of policy which we have flagged, that we need an answer to this. Should we, this 1 kilometer norm is a matter of act. The Right to Education Act says that. But if in that 1 kilometer we have established the school, but we are not able to find land, we have asked for donations for land, even donations have come in many places, and that's how we could do the 13,500 or 14,000 schools. But the other places, even donations, we are trying our best. So what we have said is we will merge it with the nearby school, even if it is 1.3 kilometers or 1.1 kilometer, because in many cases we discover in large villages there are 5 or 6 schools now. Because what happens when you start opening schools, even if it is 0.8 kilometers, there is a demand that my habitation also can have a school. So many schools, if we measure it with the measuring tape, we may discover that they were probably within the 1 kilometer range. And management of small schools is a difficulty which I am flagging as an issue in the education sector. Having said this, a lot of the other correctives that we have been trying to work on, among others, that we inspect each and every school at the level of a block education and above in a period of 3 months, something which we decided about a month and a half ago. The reason for it is that ultimately, for example, a hot cooked meal program, who manages it? The entire money goes to the school management committee. Not one pie is spent directly by the government. For the food grains, money goes to the FCI. All other costs are made available to the school management committee. The structure of the school management committee in Bihar, 75% of the members are parents of children studying in that school. The chairperson is the elected ward representative of the panchayat, and the headmaster is also there. The problem that we encounter when we visit the schools, in many places, there are complaints that the headmaster and the ward representative, the chairman of the committee, together manage the program without full transparency to all the members. The members of the committee are not empowered enough to challenge that. To rectify this, what we have moved, and hopefully it should see the light of day very soon, we have got the approvals of the law department, is to now also include in this, besides the parents of children studying in that school, the more vocal women members in the village, whether it is the Asha under the health program, whether it is the Anganwadi Sevika, whether it is a member of the self-help group, the Jivika group, a Mahila Samakhya member, the idea largely being that the school management committee has to become a vibrant body. There is no other way that we can improve the quality and the accountability of the program, the transparency of the program. So one, the problem of small schools, the other, the issue of making the school management committee as vibrant as possible. Other issues, of course, are instructions that principal and the headmaster have to taste the food before it is served, has been there from the beginning. Unfortunately, in this particular school, we find, first, the cook in this school has pointed out to the headmistress, the oil is not okay, it is smelling bad, there's a black smoke coming when I have put it in the container, when to cook the vegetable. The response is, no, it must be all right, please go ahead. Next, the children have complained, there's something wrong with this vegetable. This curry which has been made with this vegetable. No, it's all right, please consume. And this is the kind of criminal neglect that we have seen. Now, whether it is neglect, accidental, incident, intentional, all this is a matter of further inquiry. But the point I'm trying to make is, school management committees have to be made vibrant. Wherever infrastructure is not available, we have already issued directions, we'll close the place, we'll shift it somewhere. But in meeting one requirement of RT, we cannot be faulting on the other of trying to do it without the basic infrastructure. This is an issue that we have flagged as a very, very major one. Very briefly on the other part, since this was an issue on schools and learning. As you are aware, in terms of access, we seem to have done very well over the last 7-8 years. Very few children now are out of school. Our challenge was school attendance. We were down at about, as per the Pratham Asar survey, we were down at about 50%. Pratham Asar survey in 2011 had said the school attendance was 50%. 2012, September, October, after a lot of efforts, it had moved up to about 58%. Today, we are confident that we are up to 65 or 70%, largely because we have also used an instrument of development. The scholarship that we provide, the uniforms that we provide, the bicycles that we provide. Since last year, we have a clear rule and formulation now. If children do not have 75% attendance, they will not be entitled to these benefits. And that has helped us in increasing the attendance. Similarly, the midday meal program, Pratham study 2011, only 50% schools in Bihar were providing the hot cooked meal. 2012 study, 75% were providing hot cooked meal. I can say with some amount of confidence that percentage today is 96 or 97%. We only have 2,300 schools out of 70,260 today which do not serve a hot cooked meal. We are trying our best to be able to cover them, but as I said, for the smaller schools which are building less, we would like to combine them. The other thing which we are pursuing relentlessly is on quality. The Pratham study had found out that only 44.4% children in class 5 could read class 2 books. It's a very damning indictment of the school system. They had pointed out that only 34% children in class 5 could do divisions. We have taken this up as a challenge. Internally, the target that we took for ourselves, a 25 percentage point improvement in the Pratham 2013 assessments. We are also starting other assessments, but what we are working towards is in November, December, whenever the next round of Pratham assessments are done, our children, their learning should be minimum 25 percentage point better. To do so, what are we doing? We have added teachers, we have added classrooms, but more importantly, we are trying to change the classroom behavior, the classroom practices, because the probe study and the revisited probe study, it found number of schools had gone up, classrooms had gone up, teachers had gone up, but classroom practices had not changed. The fundamental requirement is to change the classroom practice. When you have a no detention policy, you have children reaching class 5 who can't even read a word. Unless you attend to that in class 3 and 4 and 5, by grouping on the basis of competency rather than classes. That is something which we have started. A earmarked teacher for class 1. Monitoring the progress of the school, the teacher and the children through very attractively designed Pragati Patraks. With every textbook, provision for the teacher for what we call a Shikshak Sathi, a friend of a teacher. With every chapter, What are the activities possible with children? What are the group activities possible? How do you assess whether children have actually learned that or not? And last but not the least, in class 1, preparing material in local dialects so that if a child speaks the local dialect in Maghi region, the Maghi language, Bhojpuri, Angika, Vajjika, Maithili, we have now a dictionary of all the words used in the class 1 textbook available to the teacher. If the child uses language, we need not punish the child to use the standard language. We need to make the child learn with the home language so that he or she understands the letter better. In this forum of researchers, Professor Shaibal Gupta, Professor Sanjay, I'd like to request, we would like IGC to do some studies on education. Our targets are very specific. What we wish to achieve is very specific. There are institutional changes which we have attempted. For example, cluster resource centers, just as one example. He is among the teachers or she is among the teachers and given the responsibility of assisting schools to improve. Now, if peer group supervision is not easy at all, if you do it mechanically on the basis of connections, you are going to have CRC coordinators who do not enjoy the confidence of teachers. We decided to completely change that, set up a guideline. The most qualified teacher with computer literacy, he or she ought to be the CRC coordinator. Now, through these processes, because peer group supervision doesn't come like this. Similarly, by way of innovation, since Mahadalits and Muslim girls, two communities where we felt extremely backward caste children, children from Mahadalit communities and Muslim girls, three categories needed to be covered specifically in some detail. What we have tried to do is, we have about 20,000 Tola Sevaks who work as teachers for the Mahadalit children. They started off as non-formal centers, the Utthan Kendra. What we have now done is to shift the Utthan Kendra to the school, which means the children have already reached the school, they're studying in the school. The Tola Sevak now has to bring the children to the school. The Tola Sevak, 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock is now the timetable for schools for the entire year. 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, the Tola Sevak and the teachers have to run remedial classes for children who need help from these communities. They also have to run a literacy program for the women from those communities in the school premises during that period. If mothers of Mahadalit children studying in that school also start occupying the public institution of the school, it is likely that their ability to influence decision making in the school will improve. Similarly, in the Muslim majority communities where we have a Talim-e-Markaz volunteer, we have identified 10,000 such habitations which have large populations of Muslims, that in those habitations, in the government school there, the Talim-e-Markaz volunteer does exactly the same as the Tola Sevak, bringing young girls from the minority community to the school, helping the child to cope with the school, providing remedial learning opportunities 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and also literacy programs for women from that community. We feel that the mother and the child, if together they are associated with the school, especially in these communities, with the additional, and this is again something which is funded entirely by the state government's plan, the Tola Sevak and the Talim-e-Markaz volunteers, but the results that we are seeing in the field are extremely encouraging. The Tola Sevak's presence gives more confidence to children from the Mahadalit community to continue in the school. Similarly, the Talim-e-Markaz volunteer gives more confidence to girls from minority communities to be in the school. The point I'm trying to make is the block education officer, for example, is the critical person in the entire education system. Very systematically, we have been investing in their improvement of their ability to manage the tasks that they have with support from management institutions, pedagogy institutions, ATIs. Similarly, the institutional gap which Bihar has on education are district institutes of teacher training, for example. Unfortunately, we have lagged behind in developing our teacher training institutions, which influences quality systematically. What we have now done is to revive our government teacher training institutions systematically, get good teachers through a very intensive assessment process as teacher educators in many of these institutions. The Azim Premji University, the foundation, Pratham, all of them have been helpful in identifying through a detailed psychometry assessment, knowledge assessment, communication skill assessment of the people who are likely to do a good job as a teacher educator. The physical infrastructure is a challenge. We've started the work, but as we see it 2 years down the line, Bihar shall have about 70 to 80 of the finest teacher training institutions in the country, with the kind of faculty which is required, which bridges the gap between the teacher educator and the teacher, because unfortunately, one of the failures of the teacher training institutions have been the teacher educator is a different class of person who has never taught in a classroom. The teachers, we do not give them a place in the teacher training institution. What we are trying to do is to challenge that. Our entire support system is now school-based. The cluster resource coordinator has to spend his time in the school, hand-holding the teacher, making the teacher practice all that, the learning facilitation manual, the Shikshak Sathi and other activities that we have put together. With all these efforts, I welcome all the research institutions sitting here. Look up and do some good, meaningful, evidence-based study on some of these initiatives. We will feel very happy if you were to do that and point out where we need to change our strategy. We are trying our best to address all the issues, but one fundamental challenge of infrastructure remains a major one for us. In our state, unfortunately, when Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan was available on 100% central grant, we were using very little of it. When it became 85-15, we were still using a little of it. The state has started using those resources when it became 75-25 and 65-35. And this is an issue because a lot of the physical infrastructure which we needed to put in place, we have not been able to do, and that is compromising our ability for quality and excellence on many other parameters, including the midday meal. So I think all these issues, availability of land with schools, so a lot of the innovation have to be system-wide, a lot of the confidence building has to be in creating institutions of excellence. Our principals of teacher training institutions, besides the best institutions in our own country, they have done their training in Bangalore with the Azim Premji University. They have done the direct trainer skills. They have done the DOT training. I'm happy that now, with the support of USAID, we are able to send 17 of the principals of our District Institute of Education and Training to the University of Georgia for 3 months in the Department of Education to learn on educational pedagogy. Ultimately, system building is about investing in individuals who are part of the system to be able to give them the skills to discharge the responsibilities assigned to them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now request Mr. Chanchal Kumar to please take the stage. Mr. Chanchal Kumar is Secretary, Building Construction Department and Culture, Sports and Youth Affairs. He is a 1992 Bihar Cadre IS officer, IIT Kanpur Computer Science graduate. He has also studied at Duke University. As a Secretary to the CM for several years, he has played a defining role in Bihar's transformation by bringing efficiency, innovation, and scale in major decisions of the government. So we have high expectations from you too.
Thank you, Adnan. I'll talk about some of the initiatives that the government took in the last 7 years, and then I'll try to also analyze what are the basic underlying features because of which it became successful during its implementation phase, and then maybe some of the challenges we can discuss at the end of the talk. When the government came to power, one of the first decisions it took in early 2006 was enactment of FRBM, Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act. By emphasizing one's commitment to this act, it showed that the government is willing to put a cap on its expenditure to see that the fiscal reforms do take place even though the resources were meager. At that point of time, we had a planned expenditure of something around 4,000 crore. That was it. But even then, the government said that we commit ourselves to prudent fiscal reforms, and accordingly, this act was passed. And the result is that in the last 7 years, we have had an increase of 7 times in the planned expenditure. From 4,000, now 34,000 crore, that is the plan size. One of the basic fundamentals was, we do not have money. Do we take loan, then invest in the developmental process, or do we go step by step, then increase, and then maybe when we have surplus money, we can invest in ambitious projects? The government chose to go with the first option. I recall in one of the meetings, RBI governor suggested, taking loan for developmental process and investing in development is always a good thing. What will be the amount? Even though you do not have paying capacity, please do take loan. It has a multiplier effect. Once you invest, it will churn in the process, and the economy will pay you back later on. You will have more capacity and better results. And that has been precisely the result. In the last 7 years, you see that if you analyze the total budget structure of the state, of the plan size, the contribution from central government, our own resources, and our own borrowings, the ratio has dramatically changed. Earlier it was 50% plus from central government and rest from our own resources plus our own borrowings. Now it is something around 70%, which is contributed by the state. So this is a change in the quality. Second act which showed the government, commitment of the government was giving 50% reservation to women in the local self-government in the panchayat bodies. This had a salutary effect in the decision-making process. When you give more role to the women in the decision-making process, today there are evidence to show that the quality of decisions have increased. The quality of decision has improved significantly. We see less disputes and more positive decisions in the local self-government bodies. In addition to that, one of the, you can say, important challenges that the government had to face at that point of time was law and order. In addition to giving more resources, more autonomy to police, certain other innovative policies were embarked upon. One was speedy trial. So those cases where you can get quick decisions, where the evidence is forthcoming, only you have to ensure that the witnesses do come to the court and the process is completed. Those cases were taken up, and the result was more than 7,000 convictions in the last 7 years on year-to-year basis. So in the last 7 years, in fact, not 7,000, 12,000 per year. So today we have more than 72,000 convictions. Result has been very positive. It had again a salutary impact on the law and order situation. Many criminals were punished and put behind the bars, and law and order changed significantly, giving way for more enabling atmosphere for carrying out other developmental activities. Trade and commerce increased. You could have better results, better outcomes in developmental schemes implementation. Now, instead of regular trial, speedy trial, regular trials also have been increased, and now we are going for seeing that the appeals are also disposed of equally expediently. In the social sector, some targeted interventions were taken, as Principal Secretary Education pointed out. For Mahadalits, many more schemes were taken out, and it was seen that these targeted interventions reach those who have been traditionally or historically lagging on these parameters. Now the result is better educational access, medical access to these targeted groups. Free cycle and dress to the girl students. And now, earlier it was for 9th class, now it has been, the dress has been extended to other classes also, and now boys are also getting benefit of the cycle scheme. In the health sector, there was a study done, traditionally you must have heard. In January 2006, 39 patients per primary health center per month. That was the attendance. Something around 1.3 patients per day, when the number of doctors in a hospital was typically 2 or plus. So even one doctor was not able to see one patient per day. That was the scene in 2006 January. It showed the lack of faith or maybe absence of government machinery in the primary health center. Certain steps were taken, free drugs, ensuring that the doctors do stay in the hospital 24/7, giving the necessary infrastructure. If there is no power, they can have generators, outsourcing of the non-core activities of the hospitals. And the result was, in October 2006 itself, another survey was done. This time, it was 4,000 odd patients per primary health center per month. So you could see a drastic change in the number of patients. Not that the number of patients had increased, it was only that people have more, they had more faith in the public health system also. I will talk about one basic aspect of governance. The idea of an efficient government system is, first you should listen to the public, what they want. In this direction, the government started Mukhyamantri Janta Ke Darbar Mein program. The idea was that every Monday, the chief minister would meet anyone from the state. Anyone who has a grievance, he can come, he can talk to the chief minister, and all concerned departmental secretaries, ministers, they would be present. And then these complaints or grievances would be electronically captured also, so that we can track it, what is the process, where it is. 10 to 20% of the problems normally we used to solve then and there itself by talking to the concerned district magistrate or SP or the departmental secretaries who take the policy decision if need be. Others, we kept on tracking through a software, and the result has been that people know that in case nobody is willing to meet them in the field, maybe the block level officers or the district magistrates or some other functionaries, then there is at least one forum where he can come and agitate. So this is sort of breaking the monopoly of the government system so far as talking to the people is concerned. If nobody is talking, at least there is one forum where you can come and tell what the problem is. And people used to listen, and it used to be monitored also. So this was meeting the demand side. People could raise their grievances and put pressure on the government system. So the idea was to take that pressure so that we can know where the fault is and then take maybe appropriate policy decisions also. How do you meet the supply side? You meet the supply side by giving better services, provisioning of government services. For that, one of the innovation was Bihar Right to Public Services Act. In 2010, it was enacted, 2011, and then was made functional from 16th August 2011 itself. And today, more than crores, in fact, 4 months, 5 months back, the report was more than 2,000 crore people had taken benefit from this. 95% plus petitions or applications have been disposed of in time, others are in the pipeline. Violations are met with penalty. The Act stipulates that if the person who is supposed to give you the service, and there are something around 52 odd services which are captured by this Act. In the schedule, you can always add it. So these services became freely available to the common man. They do not have to go to the block office and wait for 7 days, even not knowing whether I'll get the service or not. So in case your application is something where he should get the due, he will get the certificate. In case it is denied, even that will be communicated to him. And this is monitored by SMS and IT use also. Any day, out of all the 52 services in all the 44 departments or in 38 districts, you can go on the net, you can see what is the status. So the entire application process is monitored and penalties are also doled out. And the result has been very sobering. The efficiency of the administrative system has increased, because then we found out that some of the districts, some of the blocks were not performing up to mark. Then we analyzed, and then we said that we saw that some of the districts or some of the blocks, they needed some more resource, human resource as well as technical manpower. So those things were provided. Now, how do you ensure the consistency of the decision of the government? RTI is there. So one innovation was done in the state, Jankari call center system, whereby again, anyone can call one typical number 155311 and 310, and there is a person who will listen to you. You can narrate what you want, and he will do the hand holding. So he will talk to you, find out what you actually want, and then he will put that in the prescribed format by typing it, and then he will read it out to you, and then he will send it to the concerned public information officer. So one phone call, you don't need to know who the actual PIO was or where I had to go. You don't have to give any 10 rupee draft or check, because that call is a premium call. 10 rupee is deducted from your call. So that is the fees. So fees is also taken. So one call and your application is submitted. At the end of 30 days or 35 days, whatever the case may be, you will get the answer from the concerned public information officer. Or otherwise, the penal provisions of RTI will come into play. So this also, this was one single system. More than 1 lakh calls have been entertained. But the idea was, again, break the monopoly of the system. If there is some block BDO, some Thana Prahari, or some police officer, or some magistrate who is not giving you the information in the requisite time period within the stipulated time, then you can go and make a call. And this, in fact, you don't have to go anywhere. You can simply make a phone call and that purpose is done. So then block also knew that ultimately this will come back to me only through the government system and I will have to provide that information. So there is no point in delaying. So the idea was you break the monopoly and make them accountable, and they started giving the information. So this increased transparency and consistency in decision making. This helped a lot. Then one more innovation of the state government was enactment of the Bihar Special Courts and Bihar Lokayukt Act. It provides for penalty and confiscation of ill-gotten money of a government servant. And some decisions, some actions have been taken which again had a very positive impact on the government machinery. These are deterrents, these are signals that the government is empowered. There is an enabling atmosphere, and if there is something wrong, the government can act. Earlier this provision was not there, so people were sure that nothing can happen to me. Even if there is a disproportionate asset case against me, the asset will not go. I will have this unless and until the competent court, which will take 7 years, 8 years, or whatever it may be. Now the provision is that even if the criminal case is going against you, the money, if I am convinced, through a competent court, I can, through a designated competent court, I can get that money confiscated. And it has happened. The criminal case is going on, but since in the eyes of the government, this amount was found to be disproportionate, so through a designated competent court, we confiscated the houses and then started running schools and other centers. So this again had a very salutary effect in the administration of justice. Now, why these actions became so successful in the implementation, why the problems were less? Some of the features of this were, one feature was these bitter pills were prescribed by the government. One was the leadership. If the leadership is very fair, they can prescribe bitter pills, even then people will accept it, because they know that it is fair. But if your integrity, your character is in doubt, then whatever prescription you give, the second party who is to take that, he will doubt it or he will maybe resist it. In this case, since the fairness of the leadership was unquestionable, so even if these, because typically these acts, if you pass it, there is going to be, because every time I go anywhere, people say how the bureaucracy or the public, how they accepted these draconian measures so far as their interests are concerned. Idea is, if the fairness is established, you do not have anything against that, then people tend to accept it. Second is, universal schemes are better performing. The moment you put condition A, condition B, condition C in the implementation of any scheme, there is bound to be problem. So universalize. Do not put many conditions. When the cycle scheme was decided, it was that any girl in class 9, irrespective of the caste or creed, irrespective of the income level. So once you find there is a girl in the class 9 in a government school, she has to get it. So the implementation was very easy, and detection of anomaly or the leakages, it was also very easy. 20 girls in the class, how many cycles have been given? How many have got the money for that? So the implementation became very easy, and this has been found to be a universal experience. Lesser the conditions, better the scheme. So conditions should be minimized. You should try to universalize the formulation of the scheme. The ease of access to public services should be, so delivery system should be addressed. Delivery system should be sensitized, energized. If they want some resources, those should be provided. Proactive disclosure by government should be increased. Use of technology. The entire Bihar Public Right to Services Act has been implemented based on a software. So even though the number of applications was large, we could manage it. Then raise public standard so that the process becomes irreversible. If you want it to be institutionalized, you have to raise the public debate. People should get used to whatever you are getting, so they should want more. So that any other government comes, you should not be able to go back and then say that, okay, there was some problem, so we have gone back to the old manual system. So that should be done. As I said, if the public expectations are raised, then whatever schemes are introduced, it becomes more or less irreversible, because it takes majority decision, it takes many more difficult parameters to cross in order to reverse it. Use public sector undertakings also. Bihar has had the experience that some of the PSUs which were about to be liquidated, that they will talk about Pul Nirman Nigam, it was a corporation which was under liquidation. Bihar Police Nirman Nigam under liquidation. They have started performing better once you injected a new lease of life into it. Other PSUs are also performing very better. So they can also be used to effectively implement some of your schemes. I think we are short of time. I'll only talk about one or two features again. The idea, challenges ahead is how to make this institutionalization of a scheme possible. You should have structures, create structures of government or governance like Center for Good Governance. This should be kept at an arm's distance from the government. This should be able to criticize you, analyze, and then prescribe a policy solution. Whether you take it or not, it's up to you, but then these structures should be created. Prasasanik Sudhar Mission, Center for Economic Policy and Public Finance. So these are institutions which should be created, which can give you a feedback on where you are going wrong. Now, whether to accept it or not depends upon the leadership, but then these centers should be there, these institutions should be there. Making statutes, making laws for many of the schemes, that has been the hallmark of the governance in Bihar. Many of these schemes which we are talking about, laws have been enacted. So more or less it's irreversible, because changing a law is much more difficult than a simple government order. So that is it. I think when we get time in the course of question and answer, we can discuss more. Thank you.
Secretary, Road Construction Department, 1991 Bihar cadre IS officer, widely credited with remarkable turnaround of Bihar Rajya Pul Nirman Nigam and Road Construction Department. He has won several prestigious awards, including Prime Minister's Excellence Award.
Secretary Chairperson, esteemed colleagues on the dais, Anup Mukherjee sir, Anil Sinha sir, members of this august gathering, and friends from media. As I was talking to Shaibalji, this momentous journey of 7.5 years, to cover it in 7.5 or 10 minutes itself requires a lot of innovations. But I'm aware, and since the platform has been laid and Chanchal has briefly mentioned about the PSU and the restructuring, so this challenging journey of roads and bridges sector, I will just like to start first with the bridges part, because this is one area which has been talked about, unfortunately not researched much, although Rajesh ji is sitting here and he has come out with something on us in his book, Bihar Breakthrough. But this is one area which I strongly feel needs to be researched. Not the kind of impact in terms of only the economic growth of Bihar, which is basically and essentially a construction-centric, but in other fields also. And starting with Bihar Bridge Construction Corporation, and then subsequently I'll round up with the road sector also. This corporation, Bihar Bridge Construction Corporation, was set up in 1975, 11th June. And by 2005, it's important to give you a little bit of history. By 2005, it had metamorphosed into one telling specimen of all that was wrong with Bihar. With almost more than 500 employees in corporation going without salary, the government had decided to wind up this corporation. And the loss was something like 17 crores. And the reasons are very obvious. The same reasons still plague many of the government organizations today. Too much of non-planned expenditure, budget constraints, fewer projects to handle, tardy execution, poor commercial profitability. In short, when we entered the scene in April 2006 with the coming in of the government, the situation was of hopelessness, complete disarray, and employees with low self-esteem. And I still remember the first day, 19th April 2006 in this office, and I do remember Chanchal had visited me in the second half. And we started gradually, and one of the most important decision was withdrawal petition and the revival of the board of directors. Now, after this, whatever we did, and I'm being very candid, whatever we did at that point of time, I was sure that we are moving forward, but I was not too sure then that ultimately this is going to lead to results in terms of numbers, what we are talking about now, because I strongly believe that most of the employees, if they are above 50, you cannot transform these employees. It's very difficult to change their attitude. But what you can certainly do is, you can change the conditions for transformation. So this was something basic. And before I start, let me tell you, I do believe that elephants can dance. And as a part of the strategy, what we did was more than 15 bridges were pending for over 15 years or so in Bihar. So the target was to complete these pending bridges first and to bag new orders. Because if a corporation had to survive, to stand on its own, what was important was to have a financial basis. So the first and foremost issue of salaries, and to give little bit of financial viability, we approached the government. And right at the outset, I would definitely like to place my sincerest thanks to the Honorable Chief Minister and the then Principal Secretary, Mr. R.K. Singh, for all the support which we got in this momentous journey. So the first thing we did was we went to the cabinet and we got this fixation of percentage charge. What it means is that for every work which we did, the corporation did, it would get a fixed amount in form of service charge. Now, I still remember the day when it was passed by the cabinet and the employees were so euphoric about it and there was a lot of celebrations. Until then, the corporation had a very vibrant union, a lot of factionalism, and it was very vibrant union. And these people had come and met us in the office. And one message was very clear from the cabinet decision that the government means business, and the government was there thinking positive and to take forward this corporation. For the pending bridges, what we did was nothing, something great or out of the box solution, but the right person was selected for the right place. And in some cases, we created new divisions without causing additional financial burden on the exchequer. As I said, the financial condition of the corporation was pretty bad. People were going without salaries. And as part of motivational strategies, this is something now which has become common in Bihar, but when you see it in a perspective in 2006, the engineers were provided with outsourced vehicles, GPRS-enabled mobile phones, and plenty of administrative freedom. And as a part of incentive, the best reward was kept for those engineers who were to perform and deliver in form of completing the pending bridges in a record time. And this reward was in shape of a paid vacation to foreign destinations. This was something unheard of in Bihar. All these measures, whatever we introduced, were reciprocated by enthusiastic engineers. The same team. We made absolutely no changes as far as the engineers were concerned. The same engineers, the only thing is we put the right person in the right place, and of course, little bit of motivation. Subsequently, I'll just tell you about that. And all the pending bridges were completed by December 2008. The bridges of 1991 were completed by 2008. We did that, we started this in November 2006. Coming to the new projects, the Honorable Chief Minister was gracious enough to sanction a new scheme called Chief Minister Bridge Development Program, Mukhya Mantri Setu Nirman Yojana, a flagship scheme, and we got something like 1,200 crores. A corporation which had constructed in 30 years of its inception only 314 bridges. We were given a task in October 2006 to construct 500 bridges in 3 years. I still remember the day when we got this order. We had a brainstorming session with the engineers, and it looked almost impossible. And more so because new projects meant detailed project report preparation, quick tenders, supervision, and paucity of engineers in the corporation. So what we did was we outsourced most of these activities. standard bidding document was introduced for the first time in corporation. And we started going for e-tendering. Since there was limited capacity of contractors in Bihar in 2006 and 7, we simplified this process of registration of contractors, and anybody could get themselves registered in 24 hours. And normally it used to take 3 to 4 months. And to ensure quality, which I think is key in any infrastructure area, quality and time. So to ensure quality, we, first and foremost thing was this outdated lab of the headquarter was modernized, and we went for the third-party quality check system. All these innovations, first of its kind. Now, there can be no substitute to field visits. As district magistrates, my senior colleagues sitting here, so for the first time in India, we got hold of a new software, and it was we had given this GPRS-enabled mobile sets, and we installed a software called Mobile Inspector software. Now, what this meant was, the engineers used to go to the site, they used to click the photograph, and there's a customized format which you could use the stylus and just write the foundation, the substructure, the superstructure, and comments if any, and they could circulate any part of the photograph with red. And sitting in the headquarters, I used to get that report in the form of a real-time email report. This meant two things straight away. To click the photograph, the engineers necessarily had to go to the site. So it improved the supervision aspect. Second, the local representatives, the political representatives, the member of legislative assemblies, their complaints came down. Because whenever any such complaint used to come to us, we could easily show the entire report, the progress date-wise, on the basis of the photographs. And we saw this change completely. So one, we ensured the visit, and the second, the complaints also came down. Yeah, I'll just finish it off in 5 minutes. You see, I mean, you will appreciate, that's what I said in the beginning, it's a huge journey. I'll try my best to finish it off. Just give me, I'll finish it off. We were the first ones to introduce VPN connectivity in our campus. The first one, we introduced the closed user group for mobiles. All this helped in the accessibility. So the chairman could talk to a junior engineer directly at any point of time. And of course, as an out-of-box solution, we were the first ones, we went for these motivators, the pep talks, art of living, yoga, free medical camps for our employees, community lunches. We started celebrating all the festivals. So this we feeling played a big, big role. Overall, in June 2008, we started this journey. In June 2006, the Honorable Chief Minister inaugurated 140 bridges on our Foundation Day. We started a concept of celebration of Foundation Day, which was unheard of. And today, in the bridge sector, today we can proudly claim that this corporation is in a net profit of 100 crores plus. The turnover has moved from 43 crore in 2005 to more than 1200 crores today. And now we say we also make bridges because we have diversified into many sectors. Construction of weirs, parks, most of the challenging assignments, flood shelter. And for capacity building, this corporation today is the yardstick, and we take up most of the challenges. Similarly, coming to the roads, roads in 2004, only 380 kilometers were constructed in year 2004 and 5. Today we are making 3,500 kilometers in a year. And the journey is almost similar. All the best practices that time were studied all over India. We got up with this standard bidding document, simplification of registration process, use of RTMS software, resource tracking mobile system, where we used to track our engineers whether he is in the district or not. We used to track his movement on the map, RTMS. We installed this system of online project management system. Sitting today here, we can track the movement of the project, at what level it is. We have a free, toll-free helpline. First department to introduce this. And of course, most important is the e-tendering. Tendering in Bihar prior to 2005 was a subject of a lot of films, and a subject of ridicule, where we used to see people running away with the, tender boxes. Thanks to the tendering, the cost has come down, transparency has been introduced, and so if I have to sum up, whatever we did in this sector, road and bridges, it is primarily because of a lot of thrust on the innovations, especially the e-governance part, lot of capacity building. I believe central to all the reforms and innovation in our department was basically the thrust on the human aspect. Lot of capacity building. Today our engineers have traveled more than 10 countries, 100 of them. Within India, the best of the projects they have been sent. And we have a lot of these seminars and the workshops. And last but not the least, we are the first in the country to develop a long-term performance output-based maintenance policy. The first state in the country to come up with this policy. And to end, all I can say is we always got constant support from the Honorable Chief Minister and the then Principal Secretary, Mr. R.K. Singh, who really laid this platform for the reforms. Thank you so much.
I now introduce Mr. Sanjay Kumar, who is the Executive Director cum Secretary, Bihar State Health Society, and was previously SDM, DDC, Additional Secretary, and also has studied at St. Stephen's College, New York, and National Defense College, New Delhi.
Thank you, Adnan ji. I think we are already running short of time, and I have been told to restrict my speech to about 10 minutes time. I'll try and restrict it in that much amount of time. I shall begin with a note of apology because I was here for the first session yesterday. And it so happened that at the last moment something came up and I could not make it. Many a times it happens in the government that many of us have a little too less control on our own time. Having said that, let me just begin with what Mr. Adnan said. That he mentioned in his talk that public sector matter hugely. And I have a little thought on that, so I would like to share it with you. When I joined the Indian Administrative Service in the year 90, and we were training at the academy, the whole country was in turmoil. And there was Mandal Commission agitation going on in the entire country. People were very upset that government jobs were being limited. 91, there was a change of government. Under the new government, all it did was to refer the case to the Supreme Court. And in the 1993, when the Indira Sani, the famous order came, there was just no response in the country at all. It all settled down rather quickly. And we were wondering as to what has happened in the 2 years' time, which has taken the sting out of the decision taken by the government. And I think the best thing what happened was in the year 91. The reforms started, and most people in the urban campuses realized that perhaps the future is away from the government. And for some time it remained like that. But I guess something which happened in the first decade of the 21st century, more so in 2007 and 2008, to a very large extent it has restored the primacy of the government. I personally feel that there are some things which will have to be done by the government itself. And public sector matters hugely, and I entirely believe in that. And yet, what is happening? People are selling the idea that the government is too large. Government must downsize. But let me just give you a little bit of figures so as to show as to how contradictory these figures are. I'm giving you figures of 2003, which has been culled out of a World Bank report. In the OECD countries, out of every 100 people, 7.7 people are working for the government. Whereas all Asia average is 2.6. India, it is 1.4. And yet we are saying the government is too large. The problem is that when we are talking of 1.4 people in the government, 93% of the people are grade 3 and grade 4. Only 7% people are in the decision making in the grade 2 and grade 1 capacity. At times I wonder, how are we going to sustain innovation in a system in which only 7% people are actually empowered to take decision and 93% people are responsible for its execution. Look at the country. If you go down to the panchayat level and the guys who are responsible for executing most of the programs, they are the least motivated, least educated, least trained, and perhaps are having the most difficult environment to work in. And yet, no matter what innovation I do, sitting here at the state level or at the union level, these are the people who are going to innovate and actually implement the kind of strategies we are developing. And until unless we are going to rectify this matter, I don't think so. No matter how much we are going to talk about it, things at the ground level are not going to improve. Before coming here, in fact, Shaibalji told me that I need to be here in the post-lunch session. So in panic, I was looking at Wikipedia as to what am I going to say. So I look at what does innovation mean. And innovation, Wikipedia says the innovation means that perhaps you have to look at things, doing things differently, not doing the same thing in a better manner. But I would like to emphasize that until or unless we do the routine things well and on the substructure is good, innovation is not going to be sustainable. So, and this is often neglected in our government system. I would request IGC, its team, the academicians over here, can you look at the system and help us devise how do I do my routine work well? I need to do my routine work well. Often in India, we find ourselves that we do extremely well in a campaign mode. So we'll do routine immunization very badly, but when it comes to pulse polio, we will cover 99.5% of the children. Because we know that, okay, we are going to do it only for 2 days in a month. Going to office at 10 o'clock and staying there till 6 o'clock and working for those 8 hours is perhaps the challenge. And we need to look at it because unless we do this, we are not going to succeed. So one is, help us devise systems by which we can do the routine work better. The other thing which I would like to highlight is that when you are actually thinking of innovation, you ask yourself whether are you in a position to think of innovation and actually execute it. Let me give you an example. The post of a district magistrate is most important. He is responsible for maintenance of law and order and also to have an oversight of all developments which are taking place in the district. And often I feel that both these things are a little contradictory. If you freeze the power equations in the society and maintain the status quo, law and order will be rather nice. There will not be much problems with law and order. But if you inject development in it, you disturb the status quo, you are going to create law and order problem for yourself. It's the same person who is looking at both the things. Institutionally, for every position when you're looking at innovation, we must ask ourselves, am I in a position to be able to innovate? Does the system allow it? We need to study it, and I think we need help on this particular issue also. Sorry, it breaks your chain of thoughts. I'll just come back and I'll just mention 2 things which we've been able to do in the health department in the last 4 or 5 years, which has given us good dividends. Chanchal has already spoken about one particular issue, so I'm not going to mention it. I'm going to talk about routine immunization. So when we started doing polio, we found that we are reaching 99.5% of the people, as I said. We took the micro plan for polio and we started using the same micro plan for routine immunization. And we found that many hamlets, villages, sessions were just being left out. But when we took up that micro plan, what it has done for us, that while we were 12% complete routine immunization in the year 2005, by the time 2011, using this mechanism, we could reach 68%. Of course, now we've been plateauing for the last 3 years and we need to look for another innovation which will carry us further. The second aspect which I would like to mention is that we are working with the Gates Foundation and on a project called Ananya. And we have picked up the Health Sub-Center platform. And at the Health Sub-Center platform, we have given a mobile kunji to each of our frontline workers, which number about 200,000. 80,000 Ashas, that many number of Anganwadi workers, and 17 to 18,000 ANMs in the state. It's a mobile-based system by which she can, for every intervention, there are about 40 in health interventions on that. It has a short code. You can dial that short code on the mobile phone. A doctor would come on the line, it's a recorded thing, and will give you all the information. Culturally, what happens is that when you go to a house and you tell them that this is what you want to do, or what you should out to do, most people would not take the ASHA or the ANM at its face value. But if the same thing is said by a doctor on the speakerphone of a mobile, people tend to accept it. We also introduced a concept called a mobile academy, by which an ASHA or an Anganwadi Sevika can dial a certain number, and there are courses on it. It has 9 subjects on which each having 4 chapters, 4 questions on every topic, and it's a multiple choice, so it's an IVR system, so you press yourself and you rate yourself. So out of 36 questions, if you manage to answer 18 right, it gives you a certificate. It generates a certificate. And I'm very happy to tell you that just a few days back, this intervention has been given a national award called the M Billionth Award for Mobile Women and Children, and the Vodafone Award of the Year. So some of the things which we have done in the state is also getting national recognition. The last point which I would like to mention and reiterate is the fact that I'm a little worried as a bureaucrat, because at times I find that we are innovating far too much and it creates attrition down the system. And let me explain what I mean by that. Jawahar Rozgar Yojana started on 2nd October 1989. Not a single year has gone past when we have not made changes in the schemes. It's very difficult to communicate these kind of changes down the line. I'm responsible for implementation of NRHM in the state, and I have been telling Government of India every year that every year you change the FMR heads. That's the Financial Management Reporting heads. I cannot go down and train and orient my workers down the line every year that in these heads you have to book these amounts. As a result, what is happening is that many accounts are being booked in the wrong head. It is creating all kinds of problems for us, and as a result, what happens? The program suffers. So, at times, I mean, as an ordinary Indian, I wonder that why cannot we have a sustainable policy for rural development or primary health care, devise it, freeze it for a while, and do it at least for 5 years without any break. Let's do it very sustainably. Otherwise, what happens is that introduce something, innovate, in about 2 years, 3 years' time, we are out of the system, the new guy comes in, the innovation goes to 6. And the last point, which I would just like to mention before I sum up, is that the way we need to restructure the government also, it has huge implications for us. And I think last time also I was here in the IGC conference, I had mentioned it, and I cannot resist the temptation of mentioning it once again. That when you study your ordinary biology, it only teaches you that it is the function which determines the morphology. If a red blood corpuscle is shaped in that particular manner only because it has to perform a certain function. Unfortunately, in the government, what is happening, morphology is remaining the same, functions are changing over the years. And as a result, our output is not commensurate with the kind of input we are putting in. Many of us are working tremendously hard from 9 in the morning till 9 in the night, but at the end of the day, when I go to sleep and I ask myself what has been my output, it gives me sleepless nights. Thank you.
Let me introduce our first discussant today, Mr. Rathin Roy, who is currently Director of the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, public finance specialist, macroeconomist, PhD from Cambridge, worked at Cambridge and Manchester, and far too many organizations.
I did work for the UN, but that's all. I've consulted for them. Yeah, I don't know how it's come there, I must check. Okay, I think this was a very interesting session, but there's a lot of information and a lot of perspective here, which we shouldn't lose, and we must have a discussion, so I'll keep it short. Amarjeet is my senior from college, so we don't call each other sir. And all I want to say is that I'm very glad that at this time of, well, crisis in Bihar in the education department, Amarjeet is here to take charge, as he's shown us very effectively he has been doing. I just want to make one point about your presentation, which is this school management committee is possibly the most under-researched node within the education ecosystem all across India. Recently, I met with the CAG and I asked the CAG's office, I said, when you last did the audit of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, did you look at these committees? And did you check whether their accounts are audited appropriately? The answer was no. That's left to internal audit. And it's quite amazing. We have perhaps a surfeit of people auditing, the business of education in India, but it doesn't go down to the SMCs at all. And you'll be pleased to know we are planning to start that work at NIPFP, and I hope you will support us by letting us begin it in Bihar. There is a concern, of course, here that this entire business of rule by committee and this familiar tension we have in India, which is that when you want to bypass political control and legislative control, we set up committees. In every sector, we set up committees, education committee, health committee, and, people like us are good at committees because that's what we do in this room. We sit on committees. We don't fight elections. So there is that there's a sort of implicit preference sometimes I feel for that mode of oversight, which can be damaging in the long run. And perhaps that is one thing we are seeing in education, and we have crises like this, that the kind of signals you would get if you had a functioning political system, you don't get when you have rule by committee. And it's worth contemplating that as a research question, but probably not by economists, but political scientists. Okay, Mr. Chanchal Kumar, I think it was a very comprehensive presentation. The 2006 FRBM, the point you made, I think the most salutary thing that happened to Bihar is that you stopped borrowing to consume. And I'm a little sort of curious, I would have been curious were it not for the following presentation, as to why you would imagine that, plan expenditure increases for their own sake are a good thing. Unless there was some kind of major public sector spending deficit in Bihar. However, I think the following presentations made that abundantly clear that there was a rationale to plan expenditure. The question still remains that as a consequence of all this, it'd be interesting to know, are you able to attract ultimately what gives you returns, other than human development returns, which are very important, which is, are you able to attract private sector investments now into Bihar, having got these bridges, having got these roads? Are you actually getting the private sector coming in? My cursory 2 days in Patna and Madhubani district, I didn't see much of that happening. I saw it happening sort of in the service sector. But in terms of manufacturing, in terms of private sector, in terms of creating a bunch of capitalists who can use the good things you're doing in human development, is that happening in Bihar? Or is it still going to be the case that you're going to be exporting the new human development, on better roads and bridges to other parts of the country? That's, I think, an important question which you are only able to ask now because you've succeeded over the last 5 years, right? But it'd be an interesting question to know from you. There are 2 areas where I'm curious, despite all the things that you mentioned, that things are still not working. And this is not just Bihar, this is also true of my own state, Maharashtra. Why do the state finance commissions not function? Despite all this lovely innovation, why is that not taken seriously? And as a consequence, why is, what happens then is that your distribution of autonomous resources down the line becomes sclerotic, and then you rely on rule by committee. This is not just happening in Bihar. I cannot think of any state except Tamil Nadu where the state finance commissions are functional. It's shameful in my own state. The state finance commission that was constituted in 2006, the poor chairperson has 3 staff and came to see me 2 months ago saying that the government is not interested in his report. So his commission is kept, and he's the ex-chief secretary of Maharashtra, the chairperson of this commission, so no one small. And this commission has been kept alive because constitutionally you're supposed to have one. But he's been told by the CM and the FM that we're only keeping you alive because it's a constitutional requirement. We're not interested in your reports. It'd be interesting to know from one of you why this is the case. The third presentation on the roads and bridges was very interesting, not least for me since I've just taken over what can best be described as a public sector think tank. And many of the things that you said resonated. And I was very interested, it was very interesting that you mentioned a series of technological innovations. And that I know government loves. The first thing that I was told by a division of the Ministry of Finance when they wanted me to do a project was, and we want you to buy 5 iPads. So I didn't even ask why iPads, no point. I said, okay, fine, 5 iPads and can we get on? So there is a fascination in government with the idea that, this comes, I think, from the influence of a large number of people from the IITs now in government, which is a good thing, but the idea that there are systems that you can fix with technology, or human beings that you can bypass with technology. I think what was very interesting about your presentation is that you gave equal weight to both. And so if you could elaborate a little bit about what you meant by elephants can dance in terms of you change the conditions for transformation, that would be very interesting, because the 2 things you mentioned, pride in service, pride in delivery, which give you an esprit de corps, that then allows you to think about performance in the long term. Basically, those are the ingredients for any organization, public or private, to function if you're not going to be guided purely by profits, mean bonuses. If you want an alternative metric by which to reward and incentivize, then this is the only thing that we know works. So it'll be good to hear a little more detail. You'd get a chance to do that on how this would work. Mr. Sanjay Kumar, I just want to make one comment, and then I have 4 big questions that I'll close that I had on what you said, because it really resonated. The size of government, my only point is that, there's a difference. I can't resist saying this. It's a bit trivial, but it's important, I think, that in full employment societies, there'll be a difference between the size of government, measured per 1,000 as opposed to non-full employment societies. So if 40% of India is unemployed, we may have a large government because everyone's not employed. That is one. The second, of course, is that, if you take a department like the police and you ask, I think this is what you were getting at, that would I improve law and order if I increase the number of constables? The idea probably is yes. The answer probably is yes. But then you hit a barrier. I think that's what you were saying. And then you have to think about the structure of constables and DSPs, right? And I think where we are there is something that we're unclear about and that research could certainly inform. I have not seen any research on this, including when the AC was set up. What you said about the district magistrate, I think, resonates with me. I'm not from the IAS, but I am on the board of your academy. And so I get a lot of chances to interact with your phase 3s and phase 2s. And one of the things these DMs say from all over India when they come to the academy, and when I meet them over an evening, informally, I'll give you some examples. We are tour guides. We have become travel agents. We have become protocol officers. And quite a few of them say exactly what you said, that we are stressed out because there is a tension, a development function, and in those states where they have a law and order function, some of them are quite draconian. In my own state, it's not so bad, but some of them are quite draconian because it depends on the powers the police. They say that there is this constant tension between challenging the local status quo, it's not the politician, just the local status quo, and what they can do. So I think that is, again, a very useful subject of soft research. So I think the large point in taking away from many of these is that the need to research sort of, if you like, human development or human resource economics to find out what works and what doesn't should be something the IGC may want to think of, because I know at least the LSE has a lot of capacity in that, and I think I'm hearing from all 4 of you that that's an important area. Okay, I'll close with my 4 big questions, and I'll just pose them for the audience to take up or for the panel to take up and stop. My biggest question, which I often ask is, and please be honest about this, because if the honest answer is right, then I'm still worried. Why now? And why not before? I mean, the answer may be that, you have now a political primo who does it great. But if it's not that, I'd like to know, because that is depressing, because then when he or she is voted out of office, then chances for reversals, notwithstanding your safeguards, are high. And it's often a question asked, if, these things are things that what you said could have happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They didn't. So why particularly now? Is it resources? That may have changed because there's been a change in the way the central government disburses resources. Non-plan resources disbursed by the Planning Commission now exceed plan resources, which is bizarre but true. Is it that Bihar, I've heard these explanations, so I'm asking, is essentially rehabilitating what used to be an effective administration and had fallen into disrepair? Or is it regime? This would be an important, I think, very, very important thing to know. The second thing I'd be interested in knowing is, to what extent have these transformations been done by learning from other states? Would any of you say to me that any of the transformations that you discussed are things that you saw in other states and therefore you took on and modified for your own context? The third is the the notion that universal schemes are better performing, and I'll state my biases, I've always felt that. However, as opposed to in the government of India, where the obsession very often is with targeting, more targeting, and this, I'm afraid this entire business of randomized trials, you know, really one of the biggest constituencies for that is the targeting constituency. You don't need to trial much, not much, if you can universalize. So this idea of universalization, it's a big takeaway from me. I mean, it works in Bihar. Are there instances other than the cycle scheme which we've heard about where it's worked and which you like? And do the audience feel that this is something that, you know, we need to be working on, that should we work less on targeting and more on universalization? That has big implications for Aadhaar, which are uncomfortable. The fourth, of course, is a big message I'm getting, that I think some of the research that is being done here needs to address the problem of scale. That what is being done in Bihar is immediate scaling up because of the political imperative, horizontally, across different sectors, and then scaling up vertically across one sector. So is it possible in the next phase of IGC to envisage a research program which looks at the Bihar development transformation, which is what it is, as a problem in scaling up, using these examples of things being brought to scale and looking at if the sum of the parts represents scaling up to the whole? I think that would be very interesting to look at. And of course, the point you made about proactive disclosure in that context, how important is that when you're scaling up? How credible is it? I find it incredible that governments, any government, is in the business of proactive disclosure, because that can be uncomfortable, and so it'll be interesting to get some examples of that. So that would be my third question. And my fourth and final question would be, all of you mentioned the idea of ownership. Could somebody elaborate a little on that? When we talk about ownership, what are we talking about here? The political leadership, the people of Bihar, certain interest groups in Bihar, or a critical collection of interest groups, the civil bureaucracy, somebody else? Okay, so that to sort of put a finger on that would be quite useful. Thank you.
Professor at Public Policy and Executive Director, Bharati Institute of Public Policy at the ISB Mohali campus. Has taught in the US, Canada, Indian IIT, IIM, Calcutta, several other places. And I see the book that he is recently written is on my reading list, which is Bihar Breakthrough. So over to you, Mr. Rajesh.
Anjanda, for having me here. And I think the reason why I am here is this book that has recently been published. And I have tried to take a look at understanding the changes that really made I think something on which there is enough consensus in this room and beyond, the huge transformation that Bihar has experienced in the past 7.5 years, as Pratyaya just mentioned. But still, if we need further evidence to that, I don't know whether this can be called evidence, but at least opinion from an uninterested party. This is what, the first part is what The Economist magazine talked about Bihar in 2004, and then the lower part is what The Economist magazine talked about Bihar in 2010. First saying that Bihar has the claim to be the ancient heart of India. These days it's seen as its armpit, and talks about all kinds of problems that was there in Bihar in 2004. In 2010, it says, rarely has a failed state escaped political bankruptcy so fast. Bihar is far better today than it was in November 2005. When The Economist says things like this, I don't need any further evidence to say that the transformation has happened. Right. Anyway, still, going ahead and trying to address some of the questions that, that Dr. Roy just raised at the end of his discussion. I'll make an attempt to talk, and hopefully this next 5-10 minutes will throw some light on those questions. Those are extremely important questions that he raised. First thing to think about is, well, what was the situation in which the current government inherited the state of Bihar? If you look at the previous, in the 90s to 2005, the previous 15 years, Bihar has never been the leading economic state in India. It has always been one of the poorer children of the republic. But in 1985, Bihar's per capita income was 59% of India's per capita income. In 2005, it had fallen less than 26%. So relative to India, whatever India was doing, Bihar was doing far worse. The only state in India with de-urbanization. Urban population in 1981 was 13%, 2001 it was 10%. Law and order was in shambles, kidnapping for ransom had become an industry, and so on and so forth. I don't have to elaborate on that. What was the turnaround? Very quickly, before going into the causes and the innovations that was the bedrock of this turnaround. Well, this is the first law and order statistics between 2004 and 2008. There can be quibbles about all of these statistics, right? And many people in this room are far more informed about the exact realities, and statistics, as we know, do not necessarily reflect the complete picture about reality, and there can be multiple opinions about this, but nevertheless, let's start at statistics. So those are some of the figures between 2004 and 2008. Road building, which we'll come to in a few minutes, and as Pratyaya rightly mentioned, it's not a rise of 20%, not an improvement of 50%, not an improvement of 75%. It is a leap of 9 times between 2004-05 and 2009-10. Well, how do you make roads appear? You can quibble about lots of things, but asphalt is beyond dispute. It is just there or not there. Right? You can dispute about the quality of it a little bit, but it just comes there. Right? So we'll see how it happened. Expenditure incurred can obviously be debated upon whether that's good or bad, but the number of kilometers of road built is something that there can be less dispute about. Health and education. Right. And it was already, these figures were already pointed out. 39 versus 5,200 per month. Institutional child delivery going up from 45,000 to 1.246 million. It's the scale that we are talking about. Right? It's not a little bit of a change here and there. It's not marginal. It's a huge leap that has happened. Immunization levels below 20%, and now 67% above all India average. That was in 2010-11. Out of school children dropped by 85% from 2005. Now, the next day your question is, yeah, the quality of education is horrible. These temporary teachers don't know what to teach in classroom. All of that is fine. I mean, that's not fine. But what I'm trying to say is, well, first step, at least there are kids going to school. If the kids are not going to school, you cannot debate about the quality of the education. Now you can say, well, that's enrollment. Where is attendance? Yes, we'll come to attendance later. But look at these enrollment numbers. These are drastic. I mean, how does a state make that quantum leap, if I can use that phrase, in 5-6 years' time? What is the how part of it? How much? Whether all of these numbers are right at the margin or not, we can keep on discussing. But how did whatever happened, happen? Dropout rate dropped to a sixth of what it was in 2005. Teacher-student ratio dropped by 40%. Investment in economy, well, maybe there's more room for discussion around there, maybe not as stellar elsewhere. But if you still compare it to what it was before, in the first half of the past decade, Bihar's GDP growth rate was half of that of India's. Second half, it was 1.5 times that of India's growth rate. The first rebut that I get, oh, you're starting from a horrible base. Yes, it's an abysmally low base. But you know, I've never understood this critique because an abysmally low base does not necessarily make increasing that much easier. Right? There can be discussions about that. I mean, there's a reason why the base is so bad, because it's hard to make the base any better. Right? So if even from a low base, if a state does very well, well, it deserves some amount of close look. So one of this base story is what it comes to investments. So if you can say that investment has risen 15 times during this period. But you can also say, well, there was hardly any investment in 2004, which was 0.1%, so it's returned to 1.5%. 1.5% is still ridiculously low. So where is the investment? That's one way of looking at it. But then saying, well, it's 15 times what it was in 2005 puts it in a different perspective. It depends on which side you want to take your view, but these are the numbers. Being discussed quite well. Already I'm not going to go and keep talking about a list. It's a very long list of innovations, and I'm sure the innovations that I talk about in my book are just a small part of what actually happened and what actually contributed to Bihar transformation. It's impossible for anyone to list every major step that led to this journey, because it has been a huge collective endeavor. The other question, which I think Dr. Roy mentioned right now, why now? What has happened? Why did so many innovations happen now? What was the bureaucracy doing for the previous 15 years? How come they suddenly became so innovative? And there the answer obviously lies, which he also mentioned, the enabling, and not just the enabling environment, also the compelling environment. And I'll talk about that shortly. About how come everybody suddenly became so innovative. There are harder questions. Is the Bihar model the right model for India? Well, we'll stay away from all of that. That's something to debate about, and IGC is has the capacity to talk about such things, about whether this experiment can be scaled up. One of the issues that Dr. Roy also mentioned, scaling up. Does it work elsewhere? And the other question, is the change permanent? If politics leads to something that we don't want to see in Bihar, at the high political office, will this all go back? Has Bihar crossed the point of no return? Or is it all individual driven? That's a big question I think every one of us thinks about. Let's start with law and order just quickly. As I said, neither do I have the time, nor do I want to talk about individual innovations. And Mr. Kumar already mentioned the main innovations that went into building law and order, but law and order is important to talk about because I think of all the innovations that happened, law and order was the first and the most critical piece of the change journey that Bihar went through. Now, Bihar was in a runaway situation in 2005, and law and order is almost, as per economists around here, it's like a currency crisis or a run on a bank kind of a situation. If enough number of people think law and order is bad, it becomes rational to break the law. And no amount of police can ever control that. So as long as your number of criminals remains, or lawbreakers remains sufficiently low, there's a scope of having it. If the number of lawbreakers exceeds a certain percentage of the population, then the police force is not an answer to it. So anyway, what were the laws out? In the hindsight, things look logical. But at that point, the question was, does Bihar need tougher laws? Or does Bihar need more funds? So the police have better jeeps, better guns, better things to fight out these things. Now the answer that was put in place, right? I don't need to introduce the individuals in this photo in Bihar, but for those of you outside, other than the Chief Minister, the person in the center is Mr. Adnan, who's currently the DGP, at that time ADG in Bihar, and the Home Secretary, Mr. Afzal Amanullah. So they had worked very closely to bring about this transformation in law and order. But the answer seemed to be neither tougher laws nor more money. But the answer was to get out of no political interference. And the whole issue was that the police were already doing their job well. It was the problem did not lie in capturing the criminal. The problem lay in prosecuting the criminal. Arrest meant nothing in Bihar. That was a badge of honor for lots of people who would just move around because they're all on bail in a short period of time. So getting the cops to catch the culprits was not the problem. Keeping them behind bars was the main challenge. Realization of this and moving to speedy trials. And what I would term an innovation is focusing on one particular act, the Arms Act, which is almost like catching Al Capone for tax evasion. Carrying guns in Bihar was hardly an uncommon thing. And, but the police strategy was to go for Arms Act and just arrest people for possessing illegal weapons and get them behind bars for a short period of time, 2-3 years. But if you're behind bars for 2-3 years, your networks weaken, your rival gangs come up, and sooner or later you fade out of the the criminal hall of fame. So the Arms Act-based approach to policing worked very well, and it's a very interesting story. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all of that right now. SAP. What is SAP? State Auxiliary Police. For 15 years, there was only one recruitment in the state constabulary, and it was plagued with corruption charges. So the police were completely outnumbered. You just don't have time to ever recruit thousands of constables, train them, and get them onto the field in time for them to be effective. So what is the solution? Go get ex-army people on a contract basis. Put them on the field. Now, has this never been done anywhere else? Is this the first time that this is being done? Yeah? I don't know. There are some other ones which have come to, which is also something that Roy mentioned. Are we looking at other states? The bicycle yojana, which we have talked about, I believe it's not the first, Bihar is not the first state to do it. It has been done elsewhere, and Bihar has learned it from elsewhere. So it's not, the whole issue about innovation is not necessarily just about doing it, being the first, but doing it well, scaling it up, using a new idea. How do you make roads appear? Small things. The changing the registration and contracting rules. Pratyaya mentioned the F2 document, which used to be how your road construction companies could ever bid, restricted the whole field to 9 or 10 major road builders in the state. And they would form a cartel among themselves and divide up the state, and so every contract had to go to them, because only they had passed their, and Pratyaya can shed more light, I could be technically wrong on some of these claims, but I think that was the state. And changing it to a standard bidding document just opened up the whole space, so that players from the rest of the country would come in and break the stranglehold of that cartel. But that is an innovation. It needs a lot of thinking though. It's not just an ad hoc idea to go change a piece of paper, but just changing a piece of paper made that 9-time leap of roads appearing in a state in a 4 to 5 years' time happen. So very critical innovation. Mr. R.K. Singh was the architect of that at that time. Getting the out-of-state builders, controlling corruption, quality check. Huge emphasis on technology. As Pratyaya mentioned, as Mr. Sanjay Kumar mentioned, technology has been a major thrust of the innovative effect in Bihar. Social infrastructure, health, funding from NRHM was key, and getting those people to the clinics. Well, free drugs played a huge role. Is this innovation? No, not really. This is a national level policy. I mean, the numbers 39 to 5,200 dramatic. Why did it happen? But free drugs came in. People go to this thing not for medical advice, but to buy the medicines. But when they are there, they actually get treated. Incentives for institutional delivery went up. This 1,400 rupee, what was that? 2,000 rupee, out of which I think 1,400 reaches the patient and 600 goes to the ASHA worker. Once again, NRHM driven policy, but it was executed well. The point was that I have been to villages and asked them these questions. So in the Muslim Muhalla in Sasola, up there near the Nepal border, they would come and say, no, still lots of home deliveries. And I asked them, well, why do you have home deliveries? Because you can get the mother to the hospital close by, and yeah, the hospital is too far away. And how far away? Well, we need a cart or something to take the mother. The delivering mother is not in the shape to travel. I said, well, what happens if you break a limb? No, we go to the hospital. So it's not easy to create the demand for health services, to create the realization that you need to, institutional delivery is better than delivery at home is a huge exercise. Not only supply alone. Creating demand was a huge challenge, and we are doing it in a very good way. NRHM driven also here, I'll be done in 2 minutes. Monitoring doctor attendance. So there was a call center set up which would keep on calling doctors to see if it works or not. Now it worked well with the doctors. Whether well or not, I mean, it was done in the first phase, and obviously it had an impact. As with any evaluation practice, it will be impossible to scale out how much of the impact of that particular innovation was to the final effect. But it seemed like a key input. When they did it to the professors, the universities, and many of us are professors, we know it led to a huge uproar, and it was not at all liked. Because professors cannot be monitored, doctors, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, so now public-private partnership in many stages. So you go to the village hospital and the healthcare center, the X-ray, the PHC, the X-ray machine will always be broken down. Because there's a reason for keeping the hospital X-ray machine broken down, because there's a private guys who can run the business. So why don't you let the private guys run that X-ray machine? Then it's never broken down. They always get their thing and the thing working. So public partnership used in a huge way. We have talked about the bicycle yojana significantly, monitoring teacher assistant, monitoring schedules in higher education. Now the question is, well, what is the role of leadership, which is coming to why now? The current leadership obviously did 2 things. Firstly, enabling, it allowed the bureaucracy to function a free hand, which created many of the need or the ability to innovate. And the second thing was monitoring, very close monitoring. I have been a personal victim of this. I used to come and talk to the secretaries very often to get the whole story on their respective departments. And I cannot tell you how many of my meetings were cancelled because the secretaries were reporting to the CM's office. urgency to innovate, and enabling give them the ability to innovate. It's the ability with the urgency together that has led to the lead to innovation. And of course, there were innovative practices at poll times too, but those were, that's good. Sorry. Well, this is, see, the Nitish Kumar government has a very strong stance on crime, Sushasana, right? That's the mantra. And it is about crime and it's about criminals as well. When you look at the poll times, it's very interesting. Right? If we did a little bit of an analysis of the number of tainted candidates on all the four parties, BJP, JDU, Congress, and RJD. Interestingly, if you look at the candidates that the NDA puts up, and what percentage of them have criminal records, what percentage of them have serious criminal records, those even outweigh the other fellows. So the politics of this change is very, very interesting. The government seems to be putting up the wrongdoers during poll times because for some reason they catch votes. Now once they get elected, they are not immune from prosecution. So the Nitish Kumar government has a genus-based attitude to crime. Put them up for getting them elected. When you need votes, get them, no problem. Right? But then ensure that they are not doing too much damage. I don't know whether this is a sustainable innovation. You guys said this is not a recommendation, right? This is just an observation. Let's just put it that way. But things work with caste arithmetic that way. These are realities of state politics. How they work it out. There are pretty serious competition from other parties. So this is not really about administration, but it is more about the politics. And administration is clearly set within the political structure, so it's relevant in some sense. Elections 2010, all these innovations and the effect that it produced, did it lead to the landslide victory in 2010? How did the politics of all of this work out? Well, the answer is not that direct. It's not that simple. Obviously, there was a landslide victory. Was it because of all the good things that the government did? You know, the more and more I think about politics in India, I don't think governance is a rational decision for a politician who wants to stay office. Governance does not mean votes in general. It is not from what we are. On average, there is no evidence that good governance will get you re-elected. In Bihar, it got re-elected, that's sure. But if you look at the vote share analysis, NDA's votes went up by 3%. And RJD's vote went down by 9%. And that 9% was equally split between NDA, Congress, and independents. So I don't know whether the 2010 votes were for NDA for the grand work that it did, or it was a vote against the opposition because now NDA made it clear that the opposition was really useless in the previous 15 years. I don't know how it worked and how this requires more work. And I'm not a political scientist, and my methods of looking at it may be very amateurish, but this is the first look at things. So was it a verdict for development? Yes or no? But not the transmission mechanism may not be as direct as we would think about it. So I'll stop there. For more, authors these days it's not enough for an author to write a book; they have to sell a book too. So for more, go look at the book. Thank you.
Lunch. We've already exhausted our time, and also the additional 15 minutes kindly granted to us by Anjan. So what I suggest is we close down this session at this time, but I'll request the panelists and all of them, I personally thank. But then I have to give opportunity to be honest, to every panelist. And what I can do is give maybe 1 minute to each panelist to respond. Only 1 minute. Then to each panelist, whoever wants to.
Questions. Regarding the private sector participation, in our sector alone, 3,000 crores PPP projects, the work going on. One of them is a greenfield project, which is a 5.5 kilometer bridge and 45 kilometer approach road. Coming to the second one, you said, what do you mean by elephants can't dance? It's a beautiful book on an IBM turnaround written by Robert Gessner Jr. And I recommend this to most of my colleagues. The name of the book is Who Says Elephants Can't Dance. It's a beautiful book, and this book has personally inspired me a lot when I went around with this turnaround business. And the last one you said was conditions for transformation. how do you do this? What I meant was most of the employees were above 50 and their attitude and behavior, I mean, all of us know it's very difficult. So what we did was, as a conscious decision, a strategy, we went ahead with these, writing birthday wishes. As a chairman, I used to write letters to my class 4 employees, to all the employees, setting up of a gym, first of its kind in Bihar, then the better workplace, including toilets, something which is neglected in government. Then Nigam night, we started a concept of a Nigam night, where all these people used to come with their families, taking pride in the work, and Foundation Day. And to the last one, you said, as far as the replicability model is concerned, we have not taken much in our this march, but Odisha, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal and Maharashtra, they have taken this mobile inspector software from us. And for all our PPP projects, we set up a new corporation, Bihar State Road Development Corporation. Thank you.
In fact, this Bihar Right to Public Services Act, Madhya Pradesh had something like this. Didn't have a very stringent penalty clause, so we modified upon it, talking to our own stakeholders and secretaries too. And the schedule was also changed, suited to our conditions. So that is something where we learned from them, but they had not used IT for the implementation part of it. We learned from them, but we bettered it. Then, say for example, Bihar Special Courts Act, the act which was for confiscation of ill-gotten properties of bureaucrats. Odisha had a similar act which was stuck up in the High Court of Odisha. High Court was not able to declare it ultra-vires or even say it's all right. In the meantime, there were certain adjectives, certain provisions which were there in Odisha Act, which we changed, again, to our conditions, and then we enacted, and we started 2 years advance of them. They were stuck for 2 years in the High Court, but our High Court of Patna, they did not struck it down. So we are going on that. So we did learn from other states also. We tried to customize it to our own needs and accordingly we implemented it. Then proactive disclosure, yes. In fact, if you find that from all the ministers, chief ministers, all property details, and we talk about details, it's not only immovable property, it's movable property also. Government of India has also said that all the bureaucrats need to give certain disclosures on only property details that is immovable. But here you can get all the bank statement, jewelry, this and that, everything. It's a very detailed, it's exactly the same one, the format which is used by Election Commission of India when the candidate fills up the form. So now that is what is there for the ministers as well as for all the class 3 employees, all IAS officers, all, and you can go on net. Today you can go and you can see what was there in 2010, what was there in 2011. You can see the change also. So that is there as a war against corruption or campaigns against corruption. So that's the biggest step because now you have footprint. You know what's the declared income in all matters. And if there is any right, you can compare. So that is the difference. That is
two very small points. Thanks, Rab, for that intervention. One on the school management committee, I'd like to invite NIPFP and Rathin, if you could look at the school management committees, because I completely agree that we need to research it much more effectively to understand whether it is carrying out the tasks for which it has been created. As I mentioned, we are trying a change and we are hoping that if we have more empowered women in this committee, perhaps it may be able to hold the panchayat representative and the school headmaster to task to ensure that things happen the way they ought to. There are challenges of capacity development, but more importantly, the important thing is to get empowered women as members of this committee, because many a time just parents of children from ordinary households, many of them are not able to exercise the authority that is likely to be the countervailing presence. The second thing I think which is related to it is school management committee we have proposed should be a subcommittee of the panchayat, not a parallel structure, but within the structure of the panchayat. And I think this debate is now needs to be done in a much more emphatic way. I am all for the local government and the panchayati raj institutions, but creating any form of executive monopoly at any level has its dangers. You need to create community organizations at and the school level, which are part of integral and organic part of the panchayati raj. I think this debate needs to be opened in our country because we cannot do that idea, the evidence is suggesting something else, we need to look at this. The last point, the 4 questions, I'd only say I think the real challenge, and I see it, is how do you craft credible public systems? It doesn't happen overnight. It requires institutional development. It requires a whole lot of system issues, whether it's public recruitment, whether it's public management skills, whole lot of specific issues, whether it's teacher development institutions. But I think what is important is crafting credible public systems as a priority, because the sectors that we are talking about, especially the human development sector, they don't lend themselves to the market principles very easily. The state as an agency will have to continue to invest much more in those sectors, but along with that investment, it will have to develop credible public systems. Globally, there is enough evidence that it's in the realm of the possible. It is not an impossibility. And I think I would end by saying, the last book that I've just come out with, which HarperCollins has brought out, An India for Everyone, A Path to Inclusive Development, it tries to address exactly this issue. How does one create and craft a credible public system through a set of institutional reforms and changes, by looking at the structure differently, by looking at the fact that what was just a regulatory administration is today being asked to do development function. Do we need more managers than magistrates? Do we need different systems of looking at issues? I think this is really the challenge in crafting credible public systems. Thank you.
So, let me thank the panelists for a great session and also the audience for their patience. Thank you very much. Let's close the session now. I hope we can continue the discussion over lunch.
I just have a small announcement. First of all, thanks to the panel and Adnan and all of you for taking time off. I wish we had